In the beginning, there was the ground. There was a time, and it was a very, very long time ago, when the world was quieter than it is now. Not silent, no. The world has never truly been silent, but quieter. The kind of quiet that settles over everything like a fine mist, like the last moments before a deep and dreamless sleep. The wind moved through tall grasses without rushing. Rivers turned slowly over smooth stones. Trees stood in great patient crowds, their leaves turning in the breeze with a sound like a long, slow exhale. And in this world, this wide, open, unhurried world, there were people. Not many of them, not yet. Just small groups, moving gently through the landscape, following the warmth, following the food, following something older than thought. Something instinctual. Something that said, keep moving, stay together, and when the light fades, lie down. That was it. That was the whole instruction. When the light fades, lie down. There were no clocks to watch, no alarms to set, no blue light from a screen cutting through the darkness of the room. There was only the sky, moving slowly from gold to amber to deep and quiet blue, and then at last to the soft, heavy black of full night. And the body, the ancient, knowing body, understood. It had always understood. Long before the mind had words for tiredness, long before anyone could say, I am exhausted, I need to rest, the body simply knew. The eyelids grew heavy, the shoulders dropped, the jaw unclenched, and the feet, those feet that had walked all day across uneven ground, through streams and over stones, and through tall grass that whispered against bare skin, those feet finally, gratefully, stopped, and the person lay down. Just think about that for a moment. Just let it settle. The very first time a human being lay down to sleep, truly lay down with intention, with the full weight of a tired body. It happened outside, beneath the open sky, on the ground, on the actual, literal earth. No roof overhead, no walls around them, just the ground beneath and the sky above, and the soft sound of the world continuing on, unconcerned, in all directions. He would have chosen his spot carefully, this first sleeper. Not consciously, not the way a person today might choose a hotel room or compare mattress reviews, but instinctively, the way an animal chooses. Moving slowly through the last of the evening light, he would have tested the ground with his feet, with his hands. Too rocky here, too damp there. This patch, this one, just here softer, warmer perhaps, from a day of holding sunlight in its soil. Better. And he would have lowered himself down. Slowly, the way a very tired person moves. First crouching, then sitting, then, with a kind of full-body surrender, lying back, and the ground would have received him. Not warmly, exactly. The earth is not warm in the way a blanket is warm, but firmly, steadily, with the quiet authority of something that has existed for a very long time and is not going anywhere. The sky above him would have been extraordinary, unimaginably full of stars, stars that modern eyes almost never see, because now the cities glow and the stars hide behind the light. But then the sky was so thick with them, so layered and luminous, that the darkness itself seemed almost bright. And he lay there beneath all of that, this tired, ancient person, and his breathing slowed, and his eyes grew heavy, and the stars above him blurred gently at the edges, the way things do when sleep is coming close. And he slept. She might have been the one who first noticed the leaves, because it would have been a woman, perhaps, or perhaps a man, or perhaps someone very young, a child or an adolescent, curious and observant in the way that young creatures always are, who first looked at the ground before lying down and thought, "This could be better." Not in those words. There were no words yet, or very few, but the thought existed. Thoughts exist before language. The feeling existed. That particular feeling of looking at a bare patch of earth and sensing, somewhere in the body, a preference for something softer. And so she gathered leaves, not in a great or deliberate project, nothing so organized, just reaching out while sitting in the last warmth of the afternoon sun and pulling a handful of dry leaves closer, and then another handful, and arranging them loosely, without any particular plan, into a rough shape. A pile, a small, rustling, fragrant pile of leaves and dry grass, and perhaps a few soft ferns, their fronds still green and yielding. And then she lay down on it. And it was better. It was only a little better. The ground was still beneath it, still firm and unyielding and indifferent. But the leaves gave a little. They compressed under her weight and held a faint warmth, and they smelled of the forest and the season, of something dry and sweet and faintly earthy. And when she turned on her side, the leaves shifted to accommodate her, filling the space beneath her hip, her shoulder, the curve of her waist. She did not think, "I have invented the bed." She did not think anything so grand. She simply closed her eyes, and the leaves rustled once beneath her, and she slept. But something had begun. In the mornings, and there were so many mornings, stretching back so far that the number becomes meaningless, becomes simply many, the group would wake slowly, not all at once. There is always one person who wakes first, who sits up blinking in the gray pre-dawn light, their breath visible in the cold air. And there are always those who turn over and burrow deeper, unwilling yet, still held in the warm gravity of sleep. The waking was gradual. The camp, if it could be called that, a loose gathering of bodies on the ground, near a tree line, near water, would stir slowly back into life. Voices, low and unhurried, movement, stretching. The particular sounds of morning. A cough, a yawn so deep it seemed to come from somewhere very ancient inside the chest. The soft sound of feet on dry ground. And then the day would begin again. But here is what is remarkable, what is worth sitting with in the quiet of the night. Those people, those very first people, lying on the bare ground beneath a sky full of stars, they were not suffering, not in the act of sleep itself. The ground was their home. The sky was their ceiling. The sounds of the night, wind, insects, the distant call of an animal, these were not frightening sounds, or they were not only frightening. They were also familiar. They were the sounds of the world, of a world that had always contained them, that had in some fundamental way made them. There is something in the human body that still remembers this, that still responds, somewhere deep below consciousness, to the feeling of lying down on something firm, to the smell of earth, to the sound of wind moving through trees in the dark. There is a reason that people camping, sleeping on the ground, under the open sky, often report a sleep so deep and total that they wake feeling genuinely restored, genuinely new. The body remembers. It goes back, without knowing it goes back, to something very old, to this, to the ground, to the beginning. But let us stay here a little longer. Let us not move too quickly through this first chapter of the long story of sleep, because there is something else worth knowing about those first nights, something that perhaps seems small, but is not small at all. Those early human beings, those groups of tired, strong, sun-weathered people settling down at the end of a day, they did not sleep alone. This is important. This is perhaps the most important thing about how human beings have always slept, and it is something that only began to change very recently in the long sweep of history. They slept together, in groups, in proximity, close enough to feel the warmth of other bodies, close enough to hear the breathing of the person beside them, slow and steady and reassuring in the dark, because the dark then was not entirely safe. The night held things with teeth and speed and the ability to move quietly. And so sleeping together was not sentiment. It was not merely affection, though affection was surely part of it. It was survival. It was warmth. It was the comfort of knowing that if something came in the night, you would not face it alone. And so they lay close. A child curled against a parent. Two people back to back, each one feeling the solid warmth of the other. A grandmother, perhaps, because there were grandmothers. There have always been grandmothers who slept lightly, who woke at small sounds and lay still, listening, and then was satisfied and closed her eyes again. The breathing of the group, settling slowly into sleep, would have created its own kind of music, a rhythm, slow and even and deeply human. And if you had been there, if you could travel back through all the centuries and millennia and lie down among them in the grass at the edge of that ancient plain, you would have felt it too, the pull of it, the rhythm of many bodies breathing, slowing, settling. And you would have yawned, and your eyes would have grown heavy, and you would have slept. The seasons changed the experience of sleep entirely. And this too is worth understanding. Because human sleep has never been one fixed thing. It has always moved and shifted with the world around it. In summer, when the nights were short and warm, sleep might come easily and end early, the sky already lightening before the body felt fully rested. People stretched out on their backs in the warm dark, their skin bare and comfortable, the air soft against them. Sleep in summer was generous. It came without urgency, but in winter, everything changed. Winter sleep was different in quality, different in character. The nights were long, very long, in some latitudes, and the cold came down like a presence, like something with weight and intention. And the group would draw together more tightly. Bodies pressed close, sharing warmth the way animals do. Sleeping under furs if they had them, under woven grasses if they did not. The fire, if there was a fire, and there often was, by a certain point in the story, would burn low and orange at the edge of the camp, and its warmth would reach the sleeping forms like a blessing, like a hand laid gently on the shoulder. Winter sleep was deeper, longer. People would sleep in 2 separate stretches, with a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the long night, lying still, perhaps talking softly, before the second sleep came and carried them through until dawn. This was not insomnia, not a problem to be solved. It was simply how the body moved through a long winter night, naturally, without effort or alarm. There is research, modern, careful research, that suggests this 2-part pattern of sleep is actually our oldest way. That the single, unbroken 8-hour block of sleep that modern life demands of us is actually the unusual one, the strange one. That the body, left to its own rhythms, without artificial light or alarm clocks, will often return to this older pattern. Will wake in the deep middle of the night and rest quietly for an hour or so, and then sleep again. So if you have ever woken in the night at 2 or 3 in the morning and lain there quietly, feeling strangely calm, not anxious, not worried, just awake and still, perhaps that was your body remembering. Perhaps that was something very old moving through you. There is a quality to the ground that no mattress has ever quite replicated, and that quality is solidity. Not hardness, though it can be hard, but a kind of grounded certainty. A firmness that says, I am here. I am real. You are resting on something that will not shift or give way. Something that has been here before you and will be here long after. The human spine, it turns out, evolved alongside the ground. For millions of years before beds existed, before any kind of sleeping surface other than the earth itself, the human body lay down on hard ground every single night. And it adapted. It found a way to be comfortable there, or comfortable enough. The muscles of the back learned to relax without the assistance of memory foam. The hips and shoulders and the curved places of the body found their positions, shifted, adjusted, and were still. This does not mean that the ground was preferable. It was not. Every improvement that came later, the leaves, the skins, the raised platform, the mattress, was a genuine improvement, a real and felt comfort. But it is worth knowing that the body is older than comfort, that at its core, at its deepest and most ancient level, the body is built for the ground, built to release and rest and restore itself without assistance. And sometimes in the night, when the bed feels just right, when the weight of the blanket is perfect, and the pillow holds the head at exactly the right angle, and the body sinks in just so, sometimes that feeling of rightness is not merely comfort. It is recognition, the body recognizing what it has always wanted: rest, real rest, the kind that goes all the way down. Let us think now about the sounds, because sleep in those first human nights was not experienced in silence. It was held within sound, and sound in the dark does something interesting to the mind. It creates a kind of presence, a sense of a world continuing on, of things moving and breathing and existing, even while the self grows still and the consciousness dims. There was the wind, always the wind, moving through whatever landscape surrounded the sleeping group, through savanna grasses that hissed and whispered, through dense forest where the high branches swayed and creaked, across open plains where it had nothing to catch it, and ran free and low and cold. The wind at night has a voice. It is not quite a voice, of course, but it behaves like one. It rises and falls. It has something like rhythm, and the sleeping mind, hovering at the edge of dreams, receives it as company. There were insects. The endless, layered, intricate songs of insects, crickets and cicadas, and things without names in any modern language, creating a kind of ceiling of sound over the camp. A canopy woven not of leaves, but of vibration, steady and rhythmic, and somehow deeply reassuring. The sound of insects singing in the night is one of the oldest lullabies the world has ever made. There were sometimes the sounds of larger animals, the distant call of something nocturnal, something that moved through the dark on its own business, unconcerned with the sleeping humans nearby. An owl, a wolf very far away, the splash of something entering water. These sounds, rather than waking the sleepers, often seemed to deepen sleep, because they signaled that the world was calm, that the predators were distant, that nothing urgent was approaching. The sounds of the ordinary night said, "All is well. You may rest," and the body believed it. And there was breathing, the breathing of the group, which was perhaps the most important sound of all. Slow and even and very close. The breathing of a sleeping person has its own particular quality, a depth, a regularity, a total absence of the tight, shallow breathing of worry or effort. It is one of the most calming sounds in existence. To lie beside a peacefully sleeping person and listen to them breathe is to feel, without any particular reason, things are going to be all right. Those ancient sleepers breathed in the dark together, and the sound surrounded each of them, and they slept. Now the night is very deep. The story has been moving slowly, the way a good bedtime story should, without urgency, without any particular destination, just drifting unhurried through the long ago world of the very first sleepers, the very first beds, the very first nights. And if the body has been listening, not just the mind, but the body, which is always listening even when it seems not to be, then perhaps something has shifted. Perhaps the shoulders have dropped a little. Perhaps the jaw has unclenched. Perhaps the breath has slowed, just slightly, just enough to notice. That is what stories do in the dark. They give the mind something soft to rest on, something that requires no effort, no response, no action, just reception, just the gentle passage of images and words, and the long, slow current of a narrative that leads, inevitably, nowhere urgent. We are still in part one, the first and oldest part, the ground and the leaves and the stars and the breathing. There will be more to the story. There is always more to the story. The history of beds is surprisingly long and surprisingly rich, and we will get to the rest of it in time. The carved wooden beds of ancient Egypt, raised up off the ground and fitted with linen so fine it seems impossible. The great curtained beds of medieval castles, hung with heavy velvet and warmed by furs and candles burning low. The spring mattresses and the feather beds, and all the accumulated softness of the centuries. But that is for another time, another night. Tonight, this particular quiet night, we are staying here, with the beginning, with the ground and the dark, and the wide and patient sky, with the very first person who lay down and felt the earth receive them, with the very first sigh of a body releasing the weight of the day, with the sound of the wind in the grass and the insects and the distant and harmless night, with the stars, so many stars, more than anyone living today has ever seen, arching from one horizon to the other in a slow and silent river of light. The ancient sleeper has settled now. The group is quiet. The fire burns low at the edge of the camp, and its warmth is just enough, just reaching just far enough, and the smell of wood smoke drifts over the sleeping forms and mingles with the smell of the earth and the dry leaves and the night. Somewhere a cricket sings. The wind moves. A sleeping child turns and resettles and is still. And the night, the long, unhurried, ancient night, holds everything, holds all of it. The sleeping group and the low fire and the wide sky and the river not far away, turning over its stones in the dark, holds the trees and the grasses and the animals in their own sleep, their own rest, their own ancient agreement with the dark, and holds you too, here, now. In this room, in this bed, in this night that is your night. The same darkness, the same slow breath, the same body, ancient and knowing, releasing itself into rest. The ground is beneath you, in a way. Many floors and foundations below you, but beneath you still. The earth is there, patient as it has always been, holding everything up, holding you up. You don't have to do anything with that. You don't have to think about it. Just let it be true in the background, the way the breathing of the sleeping group was true in the background of that first ancient night. Just let the night be around you. Just let the breath slow. Just let the thoughts drift apart, gently, without resistance, like leaves on a very slow river. There is nothing to do now. There is nowhere to be. There is only this, the dark, and the quiet, and the long, slow history of every human being who ever lay down and closed their eyes and trusted the night to hold them. And it did. It always did. It always will. Sleep now. The ground is beneath you. The stars are above. The night is long and soft and very old, and you are held. He first beds, leaves and warmth. There is a particular kind of morning that belongs only to the very early world, not the mornings we know now, those mornings with alarms and light switches and the immediate rush of thought that pulls a person out of sleep and into the day before the body is quite ready. No, this is a different kind of morning entirely. A morning that arrives slowly, without announcement, without demand. A morning that begins as a faint suggestion of gray at the edge of the sky and takes its time, a long, unhurried, gentle time, becoming something brighter. The camp would have been quiet still in those first gray moments. Most of the group still sleeping, their breathing slow, and even their bodies warm against the cooling ground. The fire from the night before nothing more now than a low heap of orange embers, still holding their heat, still giving a little warmth to the nearest sleepers, but no longer bright enough to cast shadows. Just a soft and fatting glow, the color of something almost finished. And in that quiet, in that particular stillness between night and morning that has no good name in any language, though every language has tried, someone would stir. Not wake, not fully, just stir, turn slightly, the body registering somewhere below the level of thought that the quality of the dark had changed, that the night was thinning, that something new was arriving, and in the turning, in that small instinctive shift of the sleeping body, something else would be registered, something physical, a specific and very honest communication from the body to the slowly waking mind. The ground was hard, not cruelly hard, not unbearably so, but undeniably, factually, stubbornly hard. The hip that had been resting against it for the long hours of the night made this known with a dull and persistent ache. The shoulder, which had borne weighted, was not quite designed to bear for quite so long, offered its own quiet complaint. The curve of the lower back, where the ground had been unable to follow the body's natural shape, felt tight and compressed and grateful in its way for the movement. The person shifted, turned to the other side. The ground received them in a slightly different configuration, and for a few minutes this was better. And then the eyes, unbidden, opened fully, and the sky above, still dark, still holding its last few stars, was there, as it had been all night, patient and enormous and entirely indifferent. And the thought came, not in words, in a feeling, in a physical wish so simple and so clear it barely needed to be a thought at all. This could be softer. That thought, that wish, that small and humble desire for just a little more softness, is perhaps the most consequential thought in the entire history of human sleep. It seems too small to be important, too ordinary. But all the great changes begin in small and ordinary places, in someone's body registering something that could be improved, in someone reaching out a hand and beginning, without ceremony or announcement, to make it so. She had been watching the leaves, or he had, or they had, the particular person, the particular mind, who first looked at the fallen leaves beneath a tree and saw in them not just leaves, not just the debris of the season, but possibility. That person is unknown to us now. There is no name, no face, no story. They are gone the way almost all of the people who ever lived are gone, completely, without trace, without record. Only the idea remains. The idea outlasted the person by an almost incomprehensible span of time. But imagine them. Take a moment and just imagine them. Someone sitting in the late afternoon light. The group nearby, doing the ordinary things, preparing food, watching children, talking in low voices. And this person, sitting slightly apart perhaps, or simply turned inward in the way that people sometimes are even in the middle of a busy group, watching the leaves beneath a nearby tree. The tree had been losing them for weeks. The season was changing, cooling, darkening, the days shortening in the way that bodies register before minds do. A subtle shift in the quality of the light that says, something is ending, something new is coming. And the leaves had been falling, drifting down in small spirals, gathering in soft piles around the roots and in the hollows of the ground. They were dry, not the fresh green leaves of summer, full of moisture and flexibility, but the dried and curling leaves of a tree preparing for winter, lighter, crispier, retaining still a faint ghost of their original color, amber and ochre, and a deep, dark red. And they had piled up on each other in layers, compressed slightly by their own weight, creating something that was the watching person noticed this, felt it somehow without touching, something that gave, something that had a little depth to it, a little yield. The person reached out, pressed a hand into the pile, the leaves compress under the pressure. And then, when the hand was lifted, heard them rise again slightly, rustling back toward their original position, and something shifted in the watching person's mind. Something connected. The gathering was unhurried. That is important to understand. There was no urgency in it, no project management quality, no goal set and deadline established. It was more like play, almost, or like the behavior of a creature making a nest, instinctive, slow, pleasurable in its own small way. Handfuls of leaves, pulled from the pile beneath the tree, carried a short distance and set down. More handfuls. The pile growing gradually, taking shape, not a careful shape, not a deliberately designed shape, just the shape that accumulates naturally when you put things in the same place over and over. Roughly oval, roughly the length of a person, roughly, in its loose and rustic way, a bed. Other materials found their way in. Soft grasses, pulled from the ground nearby, long-stemmed and flexible, still holding a little of the day's warmth in their pale green color. Dry moss, which was wonderful, which compressed under the hand into a cushion of surprising density and softness. A few broad and flexible leaves, green still and slightly waxy, layered on top like a covering. And perhaps, some dried herbs. Lavender, if the landscape held it. Or something similar, something fragrant. Because the person who gathered this first bed had a sense, maybe not articulated, but felt, that the smell of a sleeping place mattered. That comfort was not only physical, and when it was done, when this small, humble, fragrant pile of the natural world had been assembled, the person who made it stood over it for a moment, looking at it, considering it, and then lay down. The difference was immediate. This is the thing about genuine comfort. It announces itself right away. There is no period of adjustment, no convincing required. The body knows immediately when something is better than what came before. It responds without hesitation, without analysis. The leaves compressed under the weight of the person's body and formed themselves around it. Around the hip, which was the hardest thing to accommodate on bare ground, the leaves simply moved, shifting beneath and around, creating a small depression that fit. Around the shoulder, around the side of the face, the moss cushioned the places that needed cushioning. The grasses added a layer of insulation, trapping a little warmth between the earth and the sleeping surface. It was not a modern mattress. It was not a feather bed or a memory foam surface or anything with the accumulated engineering of centuries behind it. But it was better than the ground. Meaningfully, noticeably, physically better. Better in a way the body understood immediately and completely. And the smell. The smell was extraordinary in the way that natural smells often are complex and layered, and somehow deeply right. The dry sweetness of the leaves, the green, faintly damp smell of the moss, the warm smell of the grasses, a little like bread, a little like the sun. And underneath everything, very faint, the fragrance of whatever herb had been gathered sharp and clean and calming in a way that bypassed the mind entirely and went straight to something older. The person lay still, breathing it in. Around them, the light was changing. The day was ending in its slow and practiced way, the gold draining from the sky, the shadows of the trees growing long and blue across the ground. The sounds of the group were nearby, familiar and quiet and reassuring. Someone was speaking in a low voice. Someone was laughing very softly. A child made some small sound and was answered. And on this bed, this first bed, this pile of leaves and grass and moss and fragrant herbs, the person who made it closed their eyes and felt the leaves settle beneath them one final time and slept. Word travels without language. This is something easy to forget, that communication does not require words, that the most fundamental human communications happen through demonstration, through observation, through the oldest and most reliable method. Watching someone else do something and understanding without being told that you want to do it too. The next morning, someone noticed. They noticed the way the person who had made the leaf bed woke, or rather, the way they did not wake, the way they continued sleeping while the rest of the camp stirred and shifted around them, the way the body stayed deeply and completely committed to its rest. The face relaxed in a way that faces on hard ground are often not quite relaxed. There was something in that sleeping face, some quality of ease, of genuine comfort, that was visible even from a distance. And when the sleeper finally did wake, there was something in the way they sat up, a slowness that was not groggy but languid, satisfied, the way a person moves when they have slept very well and are in no hurry to leave the place where it happened. Someone asked, in whatever way asking worked then, gesture, expression, the tilt of a head, "What is this? What have you done?" And the answer was demonstration. Come and feel this. Press your hand here. Lie down just for a moment, just briefly, and feel the difference. And the other person lay down and felt it, and the idea spread. Within a generation, which is a blink of an eye in evolutionary time, but a lifetime in human experience, sleeping surfaces had become a practice, a considered, deliberate practice, not yet a craft, not yet a technology, but something with intention behind it. Groups developed their own versions, different materials, depending on what the landscape offered, different arrangements. In forested regions, where leaves were abundant and varied, the beds were deep and fragrant, sometimes built up against the roots of a large tree that provided a natural boundary on one side, a sense of enclosure, of shelter. The roots of old trees create hollows and curves that the human body fits into surprisingly well. And people noticed this. They gathered their leaves against the tree and let its roots hold them on one side, and the effect was something like being cradled. In grassland regions, it was the long grasses themselves that were gathered, bent and woven together in loose mats, not tight weaving, nothing as sophisticated as that yet, but a rough entanglement of stems and blades that created a surface with texture and depth. Grass, when it is gathered densely enough, insulates remarkably well. It traps air. Air trapped becomes warmth. Warmth, at the end of a long day, becomes comfort, becomes rest, becomes sleep. In coastal regions, there were new materials to discover. Seaweed, dried in the sun until it became light and crackling, had a particular quality, a slight give, a density, and a smell of the sea that was sharp and clean, and surprisingly conducive to sleep. Gathered in quantity and layered, it created a surface unlike anything inland dwellers had known, and the people who slept on it brought the practice with them when they moved, described it to others, demonstrated it, shared it the way people share anything useful and good. The world's first beds were everywhere, and they were all different, and they were all made of whatever the world offered, and they all represented the same fundamental thing: a human mind observing a human body's need and doing something about it. The impulse to improve one's sleeping situation is, it turns out, one of the most universal impulses in human history. But there was more to the early bed than material comfort. There was something else, something harder to name, but equally real. A bed, even a very simple bed, even a pile of leaves, is a designated place. It is a location set apart for a specific purpose. It says, in its quiet and physical way, this is where rest happens. This is where the day ends. This is the place I return to when the light fades and the body grows heavy, and the world requires nothing more of me tonight. That designation matters. It matters to the mind in ways that are subtle but deep. Because the mind, always busy, always generating and processing and turning things over, needs permission to stop. And a bed, a place specifically created for sleep, gives that permission. It says, you are here now. The day is done. You may let go. Even the most primitive sleeping surface communicated this. The pile of leaves, the mat of grass, the hollow against the tree roots, each of these was a threshold, a place where the daytime self was set down briefly, and the sleeping self was allowed to emerge. The self that did not plan or worry or remember or anticipate. The self that only breathed and dreamed and was. Crossing that threshold, lying down on the sleeping surface, was an act that the body learned to associate with release, with the specific and profound relaxation of sleep. And over time, over many nights and many returns to the same fragrant pile of leaves, the association deepened. The approach to the sleeping place would itself begin to trigger something, a yawn, a slowing, a heaviness in the limbs that said, "We are nearly there. Rest is coming." The body knows where it is going and is already beginning to arrive. This is the same mechanism that still operates today. The reason that a bedroom kept for sleep, kept dark and cool and quiet, becomes over time almost automatically soporific. The reason that lying down in a familiar bed at the end of a familiar day produces, almost immediately, a loosening, a softening, a readiness for sleep that no other position quite replicates. The body remembers. The body has been learning this particular lesson for a very long time. There was also, in those early sleeping places, something communal that deserves its own attention. Because while an individual might gather their own leaves and arrange their own sleeping surface, the sleeping group still slept together. Close, interleaved even. The sleeping places were not separated into individual rooms or even individual spaces with clear boundaries. They overlapped, they touched, they created a collective warmth that was greater than any single body could generate alone. Children slept against parents. Elders were positioned toward the center of the group, where the warmth was greatest and the exposure to the edges of the night least. The strong slept at the perimeter, not assigned there, not required, but drawn there by the same instinct that has always placed protectors between the vulnerable and the dark, and the sleeping surfaces, the individual piles and mats, and gathered nests of leaves and grass were close enough that a hand, extended in sleep, might rest on the sleeping surface of the person beside. That the breathing of one became the background of another's dreams. That the warmth of many bodies, combined and shared, made the night bearable in seasons when bare ground would have been genuinely cold. This closeness was not merely practical, though it was practical, deeply, life-savingly practical in the coldest seasons. It was also something else. It was comfort of a different kind. The comfort of proximity, of being among one's own, of knowing, without needing to be awake enough to think it, that you are not alone in the dark. The isolated sleeper is a very modern phenomenon. The person in a room alone, in a bed alone, behind a closed door, in a house shared perhaps with others, but separated from them by walls and floors, and the particular modern architecture of privacy. This is something so recent in human history that evolution has not caught up with it. The body, even now, even after thousands of years of increasing separation and privacy, and the slow retreat of communal sleeping, still registers aloneness at night. Still, in some cellular and ancient way, expects company. It is perhaps why so many people sleep better with a partner, not because of anything psychological or romantic, though those things are real, but because of something much older. Because the body, in the dark, in the vulnerable hours of sleep, recognizes the presence of another breathing body and relaxes, receives it as information, as a signal from the ancient world. You are among your people. You are safe. You may rest. The seasons brought changes. The first beds were not static things. They were refreshed, rebuilt, adjusted to what each season required. In the warm months, the sleeping surface could be thin, a light layer of grasses, enough to soften the ground, enough to provide a little distance from its daytime heat. The night air was warm enough without insulation. The body needed to breathe, needed the coolness that came with the deep hours of the night, needed the occasional movement of air across bare skin. Summer beds were minimal things, just enough, no more. But as the year turned, as the days shortened, and the air took on that particular edge that autumn carries, that dryness and coolness that sharpens everything, the sleeping surface began to grow. More leaves gathered, more grasses, animal skins where they were available, laid over the top. The sleeping group pressing closer, pooling warmth. The outer layers of grass and leaves creating a buffer against the cold ground below. And in the deepest winter, in the long, dark, genuinely cold nights that came in certain climates, when the frost stiffened the grasses and the stars were hard and brilliant in a sky that seemed to have contracted with the cold, the sleeping arrangements became something more elaborate. Shelters were used if they existed, overhanging rocks, the shelter of a dense thicket, the curve of a hillside that broke the wind. Inside these natural shelters, sleeping surfaces were built up deeper. Insulation was layered. Bodies were arranged with deliberate care. The smallest and most vulnerable at the very center, where the warmth of the group was deepest and most reliable. And in those arrangements, those careful, considered arrangements of bodies and materials in the cold dark, there was something that, if you looked at it from a sufficient distance, was clearly not just survival. It was care. It was the impulse, already present, already active, already part of what it meant to be human, to make the sleeping place as good as it could be, to take what the world offered and shape it, with hands and intention, into comfort, into rest, into something very much like home. Now the story has been speaking for a long time. It has been moving through the early world at the pace the early world moved, unhurried, seasonal, governed by light and dark, and the slow turn of the year. There is something in that pace, in its complete absence of urgency, that does something to the listening mind. That slows it just slightly. That allows the constant forward-leaning of the waking brain to ease, just a fraction. The leaves and the grasses are gathered now. The sleeping place is made. Outside, in the story, in the ancient world of this story, the light has gone completely, and the night is full and dark and large around the small, warm cluster of sleeping people. The fire burns low. The crickets sing. The breathing deepens. And here in this room, in this present night, which is dark in its own way and quiet in its own way, perhaps something similar is happening. Perhaps the body has been listening to the rhythm of the story and has taken from it what stories at night are meant to give. A slowing, a release, a gentle drift away from the sharp-edged world of waking and toward the soft country of sleep. The leaves are gathered. The bed is made. It has been made with care, with something that in its own humble way was love. The love of a body for another body, the wish for warmth, the wish for ease, the wish for a sleeping place that is as good as it can possibly be. Your sleeping place is made too. The mattress beneath you, the pillow holding your head, the weight of the blanket across you. All of this is the accumulated answer to that first, simple wish. That reaching out for something softer. That handful of leaves carried a short distance, set down with quiet intention. Thousands of years of wishing and making and improving have led here. To this room, to this bed, to this breath. Let the breath slow now. Let the thoughts drift. The way leaves drift from a tree in the fading light of a late autumn afternoon. Not urgently, not with any particular destination, just letting go and falling and coming to rest somewhere soft. The night is full and patient. The group is breathing all around you. In whatever form your people take, nearby or distant, in memory or in presence. You are not alone. The sleeping place is good. The fire is low. The night is yours. Rest now. The leaves are gathered. The bed is made. The world outside continues in its ancient way and requires nothing more of you tonight. Ancient Egypt, where beds became sacred, there is a particular quality to desert light that does not exist anywhere else in the world. It is not simply brightness, though it is certainly bright in a way that seems almost solid, almost physical, like something you could press your hand against and feel pushing back. It is not simply heat, though the heat of the desert is its own remarkable thing. A heat that sits on the skin and in the lungs and radiates up from the ground in visible waves, bending the air at the horizon into something liquid and unreal. No, the particular quality of desert light, the quality that belongs only to it, that painters have been trying to capture for centuries without ever quite succeeding, is clarity. A ruthless, gorgeous, total clarity. In the desert, everything is seen exactly as it is. There are no soft edges, no gentle blurring of distance into haze. The line where the sand meets the sky is precise and absolute. A stone half a mile away is visible in complete detail. A bird crossing the sky leaves a clean and perfect arc against the blue. This is the light that the ancient Egyptians woke into every morning. This is the light that fell across their sleeping faces and drew them upward out of sleep. Not gently, not gradually. The desert does not do things gradually, but completely, decisively, with the full authority of a sun that means business. And yet, for all that clarity, for all that brightness and heat, and the ruthless precision of the desert day, the Egyptians understood sleep. They understood it perhaps better than any people before them. They gave it weight and ceremony and intention. They built their sleeping places with care and artistry and a seriousness that said, quite plainly, rest is not a small thing. Rest is not something that happens to you. Rest is something you create, something you deserve, something worth doing well. They were the first people, as far as we know, who truly elevated the bed, who looked at the simple pile of leaves and grasses and asked, in their precise and ambitious way, what could this become? Let us arrive in Egypt slowly. Let us not rush there, because arriving in ancient Egypt, even in imagination, even in the slow and quiet travel of a bedtime story, requires a moment of adjustment. The world we are entering is not the world we left in the previous chapter. That world was open and unhurried, governed by seasons and instinct. Its sleeping arrangements as organic and impermanent as the leaves they were made of. Egypt is different. Egypt is a civilization with all the weight and deliberateness that word implies. A place where things are built to last, where beauty is pursued with the same seriousness as survival, where the question is not merely how to live, but how to live well. The Nile moves through this world like a spine, long and dark, and absolutely essential, threading its way through the desert from south to north, carrying with it the rich black silt that makes the surrounding land so improbably fertile, so green and alive against the vast and indifferent beige of the desert on either side. The Egyptians called this fertile strip the Black Land, and the desert the Red Land. And they understood the difference between them with the clarity of people whose lives depended on that understanding. Along the banks of the Nile, the cities rose. Not quickly, nothing in Egypt was done quickly, but with the patient accumulation of effort over generations. Stone cut and carried and lifted, columns raised against the sky, temples built to face the sunrise with such precision that on certain mornings, at certain times of year, the light would enter through the doorway and travel the entire length of the interior to fall exactly on the face of the statue at the far end. These were people who paid attention, who understood angles and alignments, and the relationship between human intention and cosmic arrangement, who believed with complete seriousness and no irony whatsoever that what happened on earth and what happened in the heavens were not two separate things, but one continuous conversation. And they brought this same attention to their beds. the Egyptian bed, even the simplest version, even the one made for a person of modest means rather than royal or noble blood, was something fundamentally different from what had come before. It was raised. This seems like a small thing. It was not a small thing. The decision to lift the sleeping surface off the ground, to set it on legs, to create space between the body and the earth, was a decision freighted with meaning. Practical meaning first. The ground in Egypt, close to the river, could be damp. It harbored insects. It retained the heat of the day in ways that disrupted sleep. To sleep raised was to sleep cooler, drier, and more comfortably in every measurable physical sense. But there was another meaning too. A meaning that the Egyptians, who were never people to let a practical thing be merely practical, would have felt and understood. To be raised off the ground was to be above it, elevated, to occupy in sleep a position that was not simply horizontal on the earth, but lifted, poised, held aloft by something crafted and intentional. The ground where animals slept, the bed raised on legs where people slept. The distinction mattered. It said something about the sleeper, something about their dignity, their worth, their place in the order of things. The legs of Egyptian beds were carved. This is worth pausing on. Not fashioned roughly, not hacked into approximate shape. Carved with precision and artistry. The most common form was the animal leg, the foot of a lion or a bull, with the full musculature of the limb rendered in exquisite detail. The carved toes gripping a circular base, as though the bed itself were an animal, poised and powerful, holding its sleeping occupant with quiet strength. Imagine lying down on a bed whose legs were the legs of lions. Imagine the message that sends to the dreaming mind. You are held, it says, by something powerful, something sure-footed and strong, something that does not waver or shift. Sleep, it says, in the grip of that which cannot be moved. The frame of the bed was wood. In a land where wood was not abundant, Egypt is not a forested country. The great trees grew elsewhere, came to Egypt by trade, arrived by river and sea. Wood was valuable. The wood used for fine beds was very valuable indeed. Ebony, sometimes dark and dense, and polished to a shine that reflected lamplight like still water. Cedar from Lebanon, fragrant and golden, its smell preserved in the grain for decades after cutting. Acacia, the desert tree, tough and fine-grained, and difficult to work, but beautiful when finished. The surface of the bed, the part where the body actually rested, was woven. Leather straps or cords of plant fiber interlaced across the frame in a pattern that created a surface with give and flexibility. Not rigid, not hard, but yielding slightly under weight, distributing it across the whole length of the body rather than concentrating it at any single point. This distributed support, which is, in principle, exactly what modern mattress design still aims for, meant that the hips and shoulders and the curved places of the body were accommodated rather than pressed against. The result was a sleeping surface of genuine comfort. Surprising comfort, even by modern standards. The bed was tilted. This is one of the most distinctive things about Egyptian beds, and one of the most charming. It is tilted, with the head end slightly higher than the foot end. A gentle incline. Modern researchers have proposed various explanations for this: that it prevented the sleeper from sliding during the night, that it aided digestion, that it kept the head elevated for breathing. All of these may be true, but there is also something simply right about it, something that the body recognizes immediately as comfortable. The slight elevation of the head, the gentle slope of the body. It is the position in which rest comes most easily, most completely, and at the high end of this tilted surface, at the place where the sleeper's head would rest, there was the headrest. The headrest deserves its own moment, its own quiet paragraph of consideration, because the headrest is, at first glance, a puzzling object. It is a curve of smooth material, ivory, or alabaster, or wood so polished it seems to have no grain, mounted on a short pedestal, curved exactly like an outstretched palm turned upward. And this curved surface, this elegant and precise concavity, is where the Egyptian sleeper placed their head, not on a pillow, not on anything soft, on this smooth, hard, beautifully made curve of material. And somehow, this was comfortable. The curve of the headrest was calibrated over generations of use and adjustment to fit the precise space between the head and the shoulder when a person lay on their side. It held the head in a position of perfect alignment with the spine. It kept the neck neither bent nor strained. And in doing so, it provided something that a soft pillow sometimes cannot: genuine postural support. The kind of support that the body does not have to work to maintain. The kind that allows the muscles of the neck and jaw and face to release completely, because they do not need to hold anything. The headrest does the holding. The headrests were beautiful. They were carved with images, lotus flowers opening from still water, the wings of the god Horus spread protectively, cobras with fanned hoods standing guard. They were painted with colors that still, thousands of years later, retain something of their original vividness. The deep blue of lapis lazuli, the turquoise of the desert sky at the hour before dawn, the warm ochre of the sand, the gold, always present, of the Egyptian relationship with light and eternity. To lay your head on a carved and painted headrest was not merely to rest. It was to be held within an image, to enter sleep beneath the protection of a wing, or a flower, or the gaze of a god. The headrest was a threshold object. It marked the place where the waking world was left behind, and the sleeping world, the world of dreams, which the Egyptians took with complete seriousness as a place of genuine revelation and communication with the divine, began. The Egyptians believed that dreams were messages. This is important. This changes everything about how they approached sleep, and therefore about how they built and arranged and treated their sleeping places. In the modern world, our world, the world of alarm clocks and sleep apps, and the constant mild guilt about not getting enough rest, sleep is understood primarily as a biological process, a maintenance cycle, the body doing its repair work, the brain consolidating memories, the nervous system resetting itself for the day ahead. This is all true. It is also, somehow, a smaller story than the one the Egyptians told. For the Egyptians, sleep was a journey. Each night, the sleeping self left the waking body and traveled to a place that was neither fully this world nor fully the next, a borderland, a threshold territory where the membrane between the human and the divine was thinner, where communication was possible that was not possible in the busy noise of daylight. Dreams were not random. They were not the brain misfiring or processing the residue of the day. They were dispatches, visitations, answers to questions the waking mind had been carrying. There were temples dedicated to dream sleep. People would travel long distances to spend a night in these temples. After ritual purification, after prayer, after the careful preparation of body and mind, in the hope of receiving a dream that would carry guidance, healing, or prophecy. Priests were trained in the interpretation of dreams. Dream books were compiled, listing thousands of dream images and their meanings, their significance, their implications for the life of the dreamer. All of this rested on a foundation of enormous respect for what happened in sleep. If sleep was a journey to the divine, then the place of sleeping, the bed, the headrest, the pillow, the linen, were not merely furniture. They were instruments of that journey, worthy of craftsmanship, worthy of beauty, worthy of the same seriousness brought to any sacred purpose. The linen deserves its own reverence. Egyptian linen, the linen that covered the beds of the wealthy, that was used in temple rituals, that wrapped the bodies of the honored dead, was something extraordinary, something so fine, so precisely and patiently made that modern manufacturing has difficulty replicating it, even with all the machinery and technology available to us. Some ancient Egyptian linen, preserved in tombs for thousands of years, has been measured by textile experts and found to have a thread count that modern looms struggle to match. This linen was made from flax, from the long, clean fibers of the flax plant, grown along the Nile, where the conditions were exactly right for it. The process of making it was long and careful, and required enormous skill at every stage. Harvesting the flax at exactly the right moment, retting it in water, until the fibers loosened, combing and spinning and weaving with a patience and precision that was, in its way, a form of devotion. The finished fabric was white, not off-white, not cream, not the warm beige of unbleached cloth, white. The Egyptians bleached and pressed and smoothed their linen until it was genuinely white, white as the desert moon, white as the ibis feathers that decorated the head of the god Thoth, white, which for the Egyptians was the color of purity, of clarity, of that which has been made ready. To lie down on white linen in the Egyptian night was to lie down on something that had been made ready for you, something that had been treated with intention, something that said, in the quiet language of objects and materials, "You are welcome here. This place has been prepared. You may enter it with the full weight of your tiredness, and it will receive you, and it will hold you, and in the morning you will rise from it restored." The linen was changed regularly, kept clean, scented sometimes with oils, kaifi, the sacred Egyptian incense compound made from honey and wine and resins and fragrant woods, was burned in sleeping rooms. Its smoke was thick and sweet and complex, layered in a way that is difficult to describe without having smelled it, but that people who have reconstructed it describe as simultaneously warm and cool, sweet and resinous, deeply calming. The smell of sleep, the smell of the sacred threshold. Now let us go where the story must eventually go. Let us enter the sleeping place of a pharaoh, not to rush through it, not to dazzle with it, not to make of it a spectacle, but to understand it, to feel from the inside what it was to be the most powerful person in the most powerful civilization of the ancient world, and to lie down at the end of the day and sleep. The room would be cool relative to the day. The walls of mud, brick, or stone, thick enough to hold the night's coolness through the burning hours of afternoon, were now simply cool, pleasant against the hand, pleasant to stand near. The floor was tiled, smooth and slightly cold underfoot. In the corners, small oil lamps burned with steady flames. The air in the room was still enough that the flames did not flicker, just burned, quiet and amber and even. The bed stood against one wall, large, longer than most Egyptian beds, which were themselves longer than what the average height of the period would have required. Length was status, space was power. The wood was ebony, dark, and absolutely smooth, the carved lion's feet gripping their bases with controlled and elegant strength. The woven surface of straps was overlaid with cushions, not thick, not the heavy Western notion of a cushion, but flat and firm, and covered in linen so fine it seemed almost transparent. The headrest waited at the elevated end, alabaster, smooth as still water, carved with the wings of Horus spread wide in protection, and the pharaoh, who had been all day the pivot of a vast machine of administration and ceremony and military command, and divine performance, who had received delegations and issued orders, and stood in the killing heat of public ritual in heavy ceremonial garments, and had worn the double crown, which was not light, for hours, who had been all day simultaneously a human being and a god, which is an exhausting combination to sustain. This person now moved through their own private chambers, accompanied by the soft sound of their own footsteps on the tiled floor, and approached the bed. The linen was white and cool when touched. The headrest was smooth and faintly cold when the hand pressed against it. The carved lions held steady, and the pharaoh, god and human, ruler and person, the intersection of heaven and earth, sat on the edge of the bed, and then lay back, and the woven surface received the weight, distributing it along the full length of the body, and the headrest received the head, holding it in its carved curve exactly right, and the Kai-Fi smoke moved through the room, sweet and ancient, and the lamps burned steady, and the ceiling above, painted perhaps with stars, with the deep blue of the night sky rendered in lapis and gold, the stars silver-tipped, the whole vault of heaven represented on this earthly ceiling, so that the one who slept beneath it slept always under the sky, always under the stars, always connected to the great turning of things. The ceiling held its painted sky in stillness, and the god who was also a person, the person who was also a god, let their eyes grow heavy and slept what the Egyptians understood, what their entire elaborate and beautiful approach to sleep expressed, was something that simpler ages had felt but not articulated, something that even our own age, with all its research and sleep science and productivity optimization, sometimes loses in the noise. Sleep is not nothing. Sleep is not the absence of waking. Sleep is not a gap between real things, a pause in the real business of living. Sleep is itself a real thing, perhaps the realest thing, the place where the self goes to be renewed, the place where the body does its deepest work, and the mind moves in its freest way, and the spirit, whatever that word means to you, whatever it points toward in your own experience, the spirit travels to wherever spirits go in the night. The Egyptians built beds worthy of that journey. They carved them and polished them and set them on lions' feet and covered them in linen made with the patience of devotion. They scented the rooms where the bed stood. They placed images of protection at the sleeper's head. They took seriously, with the full weight of their considerable seriousness, the idea that how you slept mattered, that the quality and intention of the sleeping place shaped the quality and depth and meaning of the sleep itself. This is not a primitive idea. It is not superstition. It is, we understand now, with all our modern research to draw on, simply true. The sleeping environment matters enormously. The temperature of the room, the quality of the surface, the presence or absence of scent, the feeling of safety and enclosure, the sense of being in a place that has been prepared and made ready. All of these shape what happens in the hours of sleep. All of these are the difference between sleep that merely happens and sleep that restores. The Egyptians knew this. They built it into their beds, into their headrests, into their linen and their lamplight, and their painted ceilings full of stars. The night is very deep now, very quiet. The story has traveled far from the open plains and the leaf piles of the first part, through the gathered grasses and the communal warmth of the second, to here, to Egypt, to carved ebony and alabaster and linen white as moonlight, and the smell of kaifi moving through still and lamplit rooms. Something about this place, something about the deliberateness of it, the care, is itself calming, because there is comfort in knowing that care was taken. That someone, long ago, looked at the sleeping place and thought, this should be better. This should be worthy of what happens here. This should be made with attention and skill and the best materials the world offers. Your bed was made with that same impulse, the same ancient human wish for quality, for care, for the sleeping place to be as good as it can possibly be. That wish runs all the way through history in a single unbroken line, and ends here, in this room, in this bed, in this night. The linen, or whatever covers you now, has been touched and smoothed and arranged. The pillow holds your head. The weight of the blanket distributes itself across your body, finding your contours, accommodating your particular shape. You are held, just as the pharaoh was held, just as the first person on the first pile of leaves was held, just as every human being who ever lay down at the end of a long day has been held by something they made or something made for them, by the accumulated wish of our entire species for rest. The ceiling above you is not painted with stars, but the night beyond the ceiling is full of them. The same stars that the Egyptians painted, the same sky, still turning, still patient, still there. Let the eyes close now, if they have not already. Let the kaifi smoke of the story, the warmth of it, the sweetness, the ancient and complex fragrance drift through the room of the mind, and find the spaces where tension has been hiding and ease them open. Let the carved lions hold their posts. Let the lamp burn steady. Let the night do what the night has always done. Let it hold you, as Egypt held its pharaohs, as the earth held its first sleepers, as the long and patient history of beds holds everyone who has ever needed rest. And that is everyone, and that is you. Now, medieval nights, curtains and candlelight, there is a sound that belongs to autumn in the way that no other sound belongs to any other season. It is not the sound of leaves falling. Leaves fall too softly, too individually, each one a small and private event that barely registers against the general quiet of the world. It is not the sound of wind exactly, though wind is part of it. It is something more specific than wind, more architectural. It is the sound of wind meeting stone, meeting the thick, patient, ancient stone of walls that have been standing for a very long time and intend to go on standing for a very long time more. A low sound, somewhere between a moan and a hum, that the stone seems almost to produce from within itself rather than receive from without. If you have ever stood inside a very old building, a cathedral perhaps, or a castle, or even an old farmhouse built in a time when walls were made to last, you will know this sound. It comes at night, mostly. In the hours when the wind picks up and the temperature drops, and the building settles into its own mass, and the stone speaks, in its slow and mineral way, of the centuries it has absorbed. This is the sound of the medieval night, and it is into this sound, into this particular ancient autumn-cold darkness held within stone walls, that our story now moves, slowly as always, without urgency, simply arriving the way one arrives at a warm room after a long walk in the cold, with gratitude, with a full appreciation of the contrast, with the particular pleasure of shelter that can only be felt by someone who has, for a moment, been without it. The medieval world is not a comfortable world in many of the ways we use that word. It is a world of hard edges and cold mornings and labor that goes all the way down into the bone. A world where the distance between warmth and cold, between fed and hungry, between well and sick, is much shorter than anything most people in the modern world will ever know. It is a world that takes the body seriously, because the body is always making its needs known with a directness that cannot be ignored. But within this world, precisely because of this world, precisely because the cold is real and the dark is real and the long hours of labor are real, the sleeping place becomes something almost sacred, almost extraordinary, not despite the hardness of the world outside it, but because of it. The bed in the medieval world is the warm center of a cold universe, the still point of a turning, laboring, often brutal world. And the medieval bed, the great curtained bed of the later medieval period, at its finest development, is one of the most magnificent sleeping inventions in human history. Let us come to it gradually. Let us not begin with the magnificent version. Let us begin, as history itself began, with the simpler one. The early medieval peasant slept on a pallet. This word pallet sounds thin and unsympathetic, and the reality was not luxurious, but it was not nothing either. A pallet was a mattress of sorts, filled with whatever was available and affordable, straw mostly, dried rushes, sometimes chaff, the husks left over from thrashing grain, light and insulating, and surprisingly comfortable in sufficient quantity. The covering of the pallet was rough cloth, coarse linen or wool, worn soft with use. This pallet lay on the floor, in a single room that served all purposes: cooking, eating, working, sheltering the occasional animal in the worst of winter. The fire was in the center, or against one wall, and its warmth was the organizing principle of the room. Everyone arranged themselves around it. The pallet was laid near enough to benefit from the fire's heat, far enough to be safe from its sparks. At night, the family lay down together. Parents, children, sometimes grandparents, sometimes a servant or two, if the household was prosperous enough to have them, all on their pallets, or sharing them close to the fire and to each other. The dog, if there was a dog, and there usually was settled somewhere in the warmth, adding its own heat to the general pool. The fire would burn lower as the night deepened, tended by whoever woke to tend it, keeping the room from the worst of the cold while the household slept. The straw in the pallets was changed periodically. When it grew too compressed or too dusty or too inhabited by things that no one wanted to share their sleep with. Fresh straw, this is worth knowing, smells wonderful. Clean and dry and faintly sweet, it has a particular smell of fields and sun and harvested things that is deeply, anciently comforting. The smell of a freshly filled pallet was the smell of a sleeping place remade, renewed, made ready. It was not opulent, but it was warm, and it was together. And in the long, cold dark of a medieval winter night, warmth and togetherness were everything. But now let us move. Let us travel up through the social world of medieval Europe, up through the great chain of being that organized that world so completely and so seriously, up past the craftsmen and the minor landholders and the knights and the lesser nobility, up until we arrive at the place where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Let us arrive at the castle. The castle at night is not the cold and forbidding place that the word sometimes suggests. Not in the inhabited rooms, not in the chambers of the lord and lady and their household. It is, instead, a place of surprising warmth and rich and complicated darkness. The walls are hung with tapestries, enormous, heavy tapestries, their wool thick and dense, and woven with scenes of hunting, feasting, mythological encounter. These tapestries serve a double purpose. They are beautiful, certainly, and beauty matters in the medieval castle in a way that is sometimes surprising to modern sensibility. But they are also insulation. They trap air between their wool surface and the stone behind them. They hold warmth. They turn the hard, cold surface of the castle wall into something soft and pictorial, and in their way, intimate. The floors in the great hall are strewn with rushes, fresh ones, ideally, scattered with herbs, lavender, meadowsweet, chamomile. The smell, when these are fresh, is green and clean and pleasant. Candles burn in iron holders. The fire in the great hearth has been built up for the evening and throws its warm, unsteady light across the stone floor and the tapestried walls and the faces of the people gathered around it. And in the private chambers, in the rooms reserved for those of rank, removed from the communal noise and smell of the great hall, the bed waits. The great bed of the medieval lord or lady is an architectural achievement. That is not an exaggeration. It is a structure, a room within a room, something that required skilled craftsmen and considerable resources and genuine aesthetic ambition to create, and that, when complete, was among the most important and most carefully considered objects in the entire castle. It was large in a way that seems almost impractical by modern standards, wide enough for several people to sleep comfortably side by side, long enough for the tallest man to lie fully extended without touching either end. The frame was wood, oak, usually English oak, that had been aging for decades, dense and dark, and immovably solid. The joints were mortised and pegged with a craftsmanship that expected to last, and did last, and in some cases has lasted to the present day. The beds themselves, still existing in museums, still standing on their carved legs, still solid after 6 or 7 centuries. The posts rose from each corner, 4 of them, tall, very tall, reaching sometimes 8 or 9 feet into the air, carved along their length with the elaborate decorative vocabulary of the period. Oak leaves and acorns, heraldic animals, twisting vines, geometric interlace patterns, so precise they seem impossible to have been made by hand. At the top of the 4 posts, a canopy frame connected them, and from this canopy frame, from all 4 sides and across the top, fell the curtains. The curtains were everything. They were heavy. This needs to be felt, not just known. They were made of wool, or wool and silk combined, in colors that the medieval dye pot produced in deep and somber richness: burgundy, forest green, a dark and serious blue, occasionally a warm and faded gold. The weight of these curtains on their rings was considerable. When drawn closed, pulled all the way around the bed on all 4 sides, the canopy fabric completing the enclosure above, they created a space that was, functionally and experientially, a room within the room. Inside the closed curtains, the world changed. The sounds of the castle, which were never entirely absent. A medieval castle is a busy and often noisy place. Its population large and its architecture unsympathetic to the isolation of sound, became distant, muffled, reduced to a low and undifferentiated murmur that was, paradoxically, more soothing than silence would have been. Complete silence is unusual and therefore alerting. Murmur is familiar, expected, reassuring. The murmur of a world continuing on, held at a comfortable distance by several inches of dense wool. The cold, which in an unheated stone castle chamber on a winter night was a genuinely serious presence, was held back. Not entirely, nothing held it entirely. But within the curtains, the warmth of bodies and breath accumulated and stayed. The curtains held it in the way cupped hands hold water imperfectly, but enough. Enough to make the difference between cold and warm, between discomfort and ease, between lying tense and shivering and gradually, slowly, gratefully relaxing. The darkness inside the closed curtains was complete, not the partial darkness of a room with curtained windows, where the eye adjusts and eventually makes out shapes and shadows, but total darkness, the darkness of something enclosed, something with no light source anywhere within it, and no light admitted from without. The darkness of the inside of a shell, of a space beneath the earth, of a place that exists for no purpose other than to be dark and warm and private. And in this darkness, in this warmth, in this quiet, in this small, deliberate, carefully constructed world within the world, sleep came with a reliability and a depth that was not accidental. The mattress within this enclosed world was built in layers. The base was the bed frame itself, the woven straps of leather or rope across the wooden frame, the same principle the Egyptians had used, the same distributed support. Over this went a mattress of straw, thick and freshly changed, the foundation layer. Over the straw mattress went a second mattress stuffed with wool, carded wool, teased into a cloud of fibers, compressed within its linen cover into something dense and yielding. And over the wool mattress, for those who could afford it, came the feather bed. The feather bed. These words do not capture the reality of the thing. The feather bed was stuffed with the breast feathers of geese, the small, soft, extraordinarily light feathers from the underside of the bird, which have almost no quill to speak of, which are pure filament, pure softness, pure warmth-trapping air. In sufficient quantity, packed into a linen cover, and laid on top of the wool mattress, they created a surface that did not merely support the sleeping body, but embraced it. The feathers compressed where weight was applied, and the warmth of the body gathered in them and stayed. They moved with the sleeper, adjusting continuously to the body's small shifts and turns without resistance, without any of the firmness that reminds the body it is resting on a surface rather than floating, to sink into a feather bed at the end of a cold day, to feel it receive the weight and warmth of the body and close around it gently on all sides, was an experience that people of the medieval period described with a feeling that borders on reverence. It appears in the literature of the period, in the poetry, in the household records and the letters, and the wills where prized feather beds were left to children and grandchildren as among the most valuable possessions a person owned, because they were, not merely in monetary terms, though feather beds were expensive, The geese had to be raised. The feathers had to be gathered and cleaned and sorted and sewn. But in terms of daily life, in terms of what they meant to the body at the end of a long day of cold and labor, they were perhaps the single most valuable object a household possessed. The pillow rested at the head, linen covered, filled with feathers, soft. In a cold chamber in a stone castle, with the curtains drawn and the canopy above and the feather bed beneath, the pillow was the final thing, the last surrender, the place where the head lay down and the neck released and the jaw unclenched and the eyes, in the total darkness of the enclosed bed, closed. Now let us speak of the candle, because no account of the medieval sleeping place is complete without the candle. Not the candles of the public rooms. Those were numerous and bright and functional, lighting the business of the day and the entertainments of the evening. The candle of the bedchamber was different in kind, single usually, or two at most, set in a holder of iron or brass on the small table or chest beside the bed. Its light was not bright. Even on a dark night, even in a room with no other light source, a single medieval candle provided illumination that would seem, to modern eyes, barely adequate. A soft pool of orange light, reaching a few feet in each direction, warming the immediate surfaces it touched, the wood of the bedpost, the weave of the curtain fabric, the pewter cup of water set nearby, and leaving everything beyond in gentle shadow. But this is precisely what made it beautiful. What made the candlelit bedchamber one of the most profoundly restful visual environments the human eye can inhabit. The soft, warm, orange light of a single candle in a dim room does something to vision that electric light never replicates. It narrows the visual field to something intimate and manageable. It makes the world small, not confining, but small in the good way, the way a den is small, the way a space that contains only what you need is small. It says to the eyes, there is nothing beyond this light that requires your attention. Everything important is here, in this warm circle. You may stop looking outward. You may rest. The flame of the candle moved, very gently, almost imperceptibly, responding to currents in the air so subtle they could not be felt on the skin, but visible. The small, continuous, slow, and hypnotic movement of a flame that has been burning steadily for hours is one of the oldest and most reliable sedatives in human experience. The fire in the cave, the oil lamp in the Egyptian sleeping chamber, the candle in the medieval bedchamber, all of them the same phenomenon. A small controlled flame in a dim space, moving with its own slow rhythm, drawing the eye softly, and then releasing it again, drawing and releasing over and over, until the eyelids grow heavy, and the breath slows, and the eye can no longer find the will to track the flame, and falls instead into the warm darkness behind closed lids. The night in the castle had its own sounds, and they were different from the sounds of the open plain or the river valley where the first sleepers had lain. There was the wind in the stone as we began, that low architectural moan that was the castle's own voice in the dark hours. There was the fire in the hearth, if the chamber was fortunate enough to have one, the occasional shift and collapse of burning wood, the small and domestic sound of combustion settling into itself. There were footsteps sometimes, distant ones, moving through corridors on some night business, a servant carrying water, a guard making rounds, someone going to the privy in the cold dark, and then returning, the sound of their passage briefly audible and then gone, absorbed back into the stone silence. There were bells, church bells, ringing the canonical hours through the night, Compline, matins, lauds, marking the structure of the dark, the way the sun marked the structure of the day. These bells were not alarming. They were expected, familiar, part of the rhythm of the medieval night. They said, "The night is ordered. The world is organized. The hours are counted. You are safe within the structure of time." And they said, as the hours progressed, and the bells continued their slow passage through the dark, "The night is long. There is no hurry. Sleep is not a brief and insufficient interlude between days. Sleep is a substantial part of life, a full third of it properly attended to, something with weight and time and dignity." The medieval world, for all its hardness, understood this. The bed, that magnificent, curtained, feather-filled, candlelit construction, was evidence of how seriously sleep was taken, not as a necessity to be got through quickly and efficiently, but as something deserved, something crafted for, something that the end of the day moved toward as its natural and proper destination. There is something in the enclosed bed, the curtained, canopied, enclosed bed, that speaks to something very deep, because the human being, for all its remarkable adaptability, for all its capacity to sleep in extraordinary conditions and impossible places, has a preference, a deep and ancient preference that has nothing to do with civilization or luxury or any particular period of history. The preference for enclosure, for a sleeping place that has boundaries, that has a sense of being within something rather than exposed to everything. Think of how children sleep. Given the choice, given freedom, children build dens. They pull blankets over their heads. They sleep in the corner of the bed, pressed against the wall. They make nests of whatever soft material is available and burrow into them. They have not been taught this. It is not a learned behavior. It is something very old, very instinctive, running in the body below the level of instruction or example. The curtained bed of the medieval period was the most fully realized expression of this instinct that had yet existed in human history. It was an enclosure, a nest, a space defined and bounded on all sides, warm and dark and private, with its own atmosphere of breath and warmth, and the particular intimate smell of the people who slept within it. It was not a bed. It was a shelter, a portable shelter that happened to be inside a larger shelter, a room within a castle, within a landscape, within the dark and patient night. Inside it, the self could be entirely private, entirely released. The Lord, who had all day been performing lordship, the authority, the judgment, the visible power that a position of command requires, could, inside these curtains, simply be a person. Tired, warm, lying down in the dark, letting the day's performance dissolve. The lady who had all day been managing the vast domestic enterprise of the castle, the food, the servants, the guests, the elaborate social choreography of medieval household life, could let all of that go, could stop managing, could be held simply by the feathers and the warmth and the heavy curtains and the dark, and the servant who had worked since before dawn and would work again at dawn, who had been cold and tired and in motion for all the hours of the day, could lie down on their pallet near the fire and pull their blanket close and feel the warmth spread slowly through their bones, and let the firelight behind their closed eyelids dim, slowly, as the fire settled into nothing. All of them, lord and lady and servant and child, the same darkness in the end, the same warmth, the same slow breath, the same release. Let the story rest here for a moment, in a medieval castle, in the deep of an autumn night, with the wind speaking low in the stone, and the candle burned nearly to its base, and the flame moving in its slow and private way, and the curtains drawn all the way around the great bed, and the feathers warm beneath and above. The world outside the curtains is large and cold, and full of the ordinary difficulties of a difficult age. But that world is at a distance now, muffled by wool and warmth and the small enclosed darkness of the bed. The bells will ring again sometime in the night. Matins, perhaps, the bell that sounds in the deepest hours, the hour that feels furthest from both yesterday and tomorrow, the hour that belongs entirely to the night itself. And the sleeping person within the curtains will hear it dimly through the warm fog of deep sleep, and the sound will register as neither alarm nor requirement, but simply as confirmation. The world continues. The night is being counted. All is as it should be, and the curtains will hold the warmth, and the feathers will receive the weight, and the candle will gutter low and go out, and the darkness inside the curtains will become complete, and the breath will slow and deepen, and the body will go still. Now your curtains are whatever surrounds you tonight. The walls of your room, the blanket pulled close, weight of the night pressing gently from all sides, keeping the world at a manageable distance, creating that same small and necessary enclosure that the great medieval beds were built to provide. You are in your den, your nest, your warm enclosed shelter within the larger shelter of the night. The wind is somewhere distant. The bells, in whatever form they come to you, the low sound of the city, the hum of the world, the quiet that means everyone nearby is sleeping, mark the hours in their patient way. The candle of this story burns low. The warmth is here. The curtains are drawn. Let the eyes close now, fully, without reservation. Let the thoughts that have been moving through the mind slow their movement and lose their direction and simply drift, like smoke from a candle just extinguished, upward into the dark, curling and dispersing, and becoming nothing in particular. The feather bed of the night receives you. The darkness is complete and kind. The stone hums its low and ancient note, and the sleep that has been waiting patiently, without urgency, knowing it would be arrived at in time, comes now, quietly, the way warmth comes to cold hands held near a fire, gradually, and then all at once, and then all the way. Sleep now. The curtains are drawn around you. The feathers are warm beneath you. The candle is out. The night is deep and enclosed and entirely yours. The great mattress, springs and softness. There is a particular kind of morning that belongs only to the 19th century, not the mornings of ancient Egypt, with their ruthless desert light and their absolute clarity, not the mornings of the medieval world, gray and cold, and arriving through narrow stone windows with the sound of bells already in the air. This morning is different. This morning has a quality that is entirely its own, a combination of elements that could not have existed in any earlier time and would not survive into the later one, a morning that is, in its way, the most complicated morning in the long history of human waking. Begins with sound, and the sounds are layered in a way that no previous morning in human history had been layered. There is the sound of the city, because this morning belongs, more than any other, to the city, to the great swelling industrial cities that the 19th century built with such ferocious energy and such magnificent indifference to the cost. The city sounds arrive before the light does. The clatter of cart wheels on cobblestone, already moving before dawn, because the city never entirely stops. The distant percussion of factory work beginning its day shift, a low and rhythmic thudding that travels through the ground as much as through the air. The call of street vendors, starting their rounds in the early gray. The sound of many thousands of people, packed into streets and buildings and rooms that would have seemed impossibly crowded to any previous generation, beginning the enormous collective daily business of being alive in a place where everything happens at once and nothing waits. And into this sound, into this new and complicated music of the industrial world, the person lying in their bed wakes, or begins to wake. The waking is not immediate. The body, which has its own preferences and its own timeline regardless of what the century outside requires of it, surfaces slowly. The sounds of the morning arrive first as part of a dream, incorporated, reinterpreted, woven into whatever narrative the sleeping mind has been constructing in the dark hours. And then, gradually, the dream thins. The sounds become too specific, too persistent, too undeniably real to remain part of the story the mind is telling itself. And the eyes open, and the ceiling is there. Plaster, probably. White or off-white, cracked perhaps in one corner, with the particular texture of old plaster that has been painted over many times, and now shows its history in its surface, the slight unevenness, the ghost of an earlier color showing through in a certain light. This ceiling, this room, this morning, and beneath the waking person, beneath the body that is still heavy with sleep, still warm, still reluctant to release the night and its rest, the mattress of the 19th century, was in transition. This is the most honest way to put it. It was not yet what it would become, not yet the thing that would change sleep for every person in the industrial world, and eventually for almost every person on Earth. But it was moving toward that thing, feeling its way toward it through a series of inventions and improvements and experiments that were happening with the characteristic energy of the age, in workshops and factories and patent offices across Europe and America simultaneously. For most of human history, all of it, from the leaf piles of the earliest people to the feather beds of the medieval nobility, the mattress had been filled with something natural. Straw, wool, cotton, horsehair, feathers. These materials had the virtue of availability and the limitation of their own nature. They compressed over time and did not recover. They clumped. They absorbed moisture. They harbored things. They required regular refreshing, regular turning, regular replacement. A mattress of horsehair or cotton batting, in heavy use, would within a year or two have developed permanent depressions in the shapes of the bodies that slept on it. The history of its occupants written in compressed fiber. The record of every night's rest preserved in permanent indentation. This was not entirely bad. The familiar depression of one's own side of a well-used mattress has its own comfort, the body returning to a shape that knows it, that has been formed by it, that fits. But it was also, over time, a source of the particular kind of back pain that has accompanied sleep for most of human history. The spine, resting night after night in a shape that no longer quite supported it, registering its complaints in the morning with a stiffness and ache that the waking person simply accepted as part of waking, part of being a body, part of the ordinary cost of rest. And then, in a workshop somewhere, in the mind of someone who was probably tired in the most productive kind of way, tired of the same problem repeating itself, tired of the same inadequate solution being accepted simply because no better solution had yet been proposed. A spring was inserted into a mattress. Let us stay with this moment. Let us not rush past it in the way that history tends to rush past its own pivots, the moments where everything quietly changes. The spring, the metal coil, the helix of steel wire wound tightly around a central axis, compressed under load and returning reliably, repeatedly, without fatigue, to its original shape when the load was removed. This was not a new invention. Springs had existed for some time in clocks and carriages and various mechanical applications. The spring as a mechanical principle was well understood. What was new was the application, the insight that this property, compression and recovery indefinitely, without the permanent deformation that plagued every natural filling, was exactly what a sleeping surface needed. The first spring mattresses were simple. A layer of coiled springs, each one independent, arranged across the base of the mattress frame and covered with padding, cotton, horsehair, whatever the manufacturer used, and then with the outer fabric, ticking it was called, the tight-woven, striped fabric that covered the mattress, that gave it its familiar exterior. The word itself has a satisfying solidity. Ticking, the mattress ticking, the fabric that holds everything in, that keeps the interior of the mattress its own private territory. But what happened inside, beneath the ticking, was new, was genuinely new, was something that had never existed before in the long history of human sleep. When a body lay down on a spring mattress for the first time, the springs beneath it compressed, each one independently, responding to the exact weight applied to exactly that location, giving precisely as much as the load required, and no more. The spring beneath the hip, where the most weight concentrated, where the most support was needed, compressed the most. The spring beneath the waist, where the body curved away from the surface, where a rigid mattress would offer no support at all, remained almost uncompressed, present and ready, waiting. The spring beneath the shoulder gave a little more than the spring beneath the arm. The result was a surface that was not flat, that was not asking the body to conform to it, that was, instead, conforming to the body, following its contours, supporting its curves, meeting it exactly where it was rather than requiring it to come down to a flat and indifferent plane. This was something the human body had never experienced in sleep. Not once, all the hundreds of thousands of years of human sleeping. On the ground, on leaves, on wooden frames, on straw, on wool, on feathers. The sleeping surface had always been fundamentally flat, or flat tending. The feather bed came closest to conforming, but even feathers, in sufficient quantity, eventually redistributed and found their own level. Only springs could give, and then give, and then give again, night after night, without memory, without accumulation, without the record of previous nights writing itself into the surface and waiting for tonight's sleeper. There was a man, and there were several men, actually, because important inventions are always arrived at by several minds simultaneously, each one working independently in the particular climate of ideas that makes a certain solution suddenly possible, who lay down on the first prototype of a sprung mattress and felt something shift, not dramatically, nothing so crude as a sudden revelation, just a shift, a quiet physical acknowledgement somewhere below the level of thought that something was different here. Something was better in a way that was hard to immediately articulate, but impossible to ignore. The spine, which had carried the day's labor and expected to spend the night negotiating with an unyielding surface, found instead that the surface had come to meet it, that there was nothing to negotiate, that the mattress had already, silently, and without being asked, arranged itself around the body's requirements. He lay still for a moment, this first person on the first spring mattress, just absorbing it, just letting the body's response arrive without interpretation, without analysis. And the response was simple and total and entirely physical. The muscles of the back, which had been preparing, as they always did from long habit, to hold a certain amount of tension through the night, to maintain the spine's alignment against a surface that would not do it for them, those muscles simply released, stopped preparing, let go, and the whole body followed. The spring mattress spread slowly at first, and then, with the gathering speed of something whose time has come, it was not immediately affordable to everyone. The manufacturing was precise. The materials were not cheap. And in the early decades of the spring mattress's existence, it was a luxury, available to those who could pay for it, aspirational for those who could not. The well-appointed bedroom of a prosperous Victorian household would have had one, would have shown it off, in fact, because beds in the Victorian period were still among the most significant objects in a home, still displayed and discussed and admired in a way that seems excessive to modern sensibility, but made complete sense in a world where a good bed was genuinely one of the most expensive things a household owned. The Victorian bed, the brass bed particularly, which emerged as the dominant form in the middle of the 19th century, was something to look at as well as something to sleep in. The frame was cast iron or brass, gleaming its posts and headboard worked into elaborate organic patterns, flowers and leaves and twisting stems, the whole natural world pressed into metal and arranged around the sleeping space. The headboard rose tall and ornate. The footboard echoed it. The whole thing gleamed in the lamplight of the bedroom with the particular warm brightness of polished brass, and it said to everyone who saw it, "This household takes its rest seriously. This household has arrived at a certain point. This is a bed worth sleeping in, and the spring mattress inside it, beneath the cotton ticking, beneath the bolster and the pillows and the turned-down sheets, was doing its quiet and revolutionary work, holding each sleeper as no mattress before it had been able to hold them, giving and recovering, supporting and yielding, doing what the body needed without being asked, night after night, without complaint, without fatigue, without the slow deterioration that had always, before springs, been the inevitable fate of every sleeping surface. But let us leave the grand Victorian bedroom for a moment. Let us go somewhere smaller, somewhere more ordinary, and in its ordinariness, more true to the actual experience of the spring mattresses spread through the world. Let us go to a small house at the end of a long street in a mill town. Not London, not Paris, not any of the great capitals of the 19th century. A mill town, the kind of town that the Industrial Revolution built in its own image, functional, dense, the streets laid out in the grid of practicality rather than the curve of organic growth, the air carrying always the particular quality of industrial air, the faint smell of coal and metal, and the river that powered the mill. The house is small, 2 up, 2 down, as they said, 2 rooms on the ground floor, 2 rooms above. The family that lives in it is large for the space. Husband and wife, 3 or 4 children, possibly a lodger in the back room for the extra income. The furniture is plain and has been used hard and shows it. The curtains are faded but clean. The table in the kitchen downstairs is scrubbed pale, and in the front bedroom, the best bedroom, the room that faces the street and gets the most light, there is a new mattress. It is not the finest mattress available. It is not the mattress of the prosperous household with the brass bed and the servants. It is a modest spring mattress, its ticking plain and its springs few and its padding thin. But it is a spring mattress. The family saved for it. The purchase was planned and discussed and anticipated for months, perhaps years. The old mattress stuffed with flock, which is the recovered fiber from old wool and cotton, dense and clumped, and not kind to sleeping bodies, went to the rag man, or to the children's room, or simply out. And the new mattress arrived. The wife made the bed over it, tucked the sheets with the particular care that something new deserves, smoothed the surface with her palm, feeling the slight give of it, the unfamiliar resilience. And that night, when the long day of mill work cooking and children, and the 1,000 ordinary labors of a Victorian working-class life was finally done. She lay down on it and felt the springs, not consciously, not with analysis or appreciation or any articulate recognition, just felt them, felt the surface give beneath her in a way the old mattress never had, felt the support arrive at her hips, her back, the place between her shoulder blades that had carried tension all day, felt the mattress meet her rather than wait for her to adapt to it. And she was asleep, perhaps, before she had fully registered what was different. The body does not require the mind's permission to recognize comfort. The body simply responds. The muscles released, the breathing slowed, the long day dissolved into the dark, and the springs held. There is something philosophically interesting about a spring, something worth considering in the quiet of the night, if the mind is still enough to consider things gently and without urgency. A spring works because it remembers its own shape. Under any load, under any compression, the spring maintains the knowledge of what it is. It gives, yes. It yields completely to whatever weight is applied, accommodates it fully, does not resist. But it does not forget. The moment the load is removed, the spring returns. Exactly, completely, without any of the drift or deformation that affects every other material. This is a remarkable property. The combination of complete accommodation and complete recovery. The ability to yield entirely without losing oneself. The body on the spring mattress is held by something that gives without giving up, that yields without surrendering, that meets the sleeper exactly where they are and holds them there. And when morning comes and the body rises, returns to itself completely, ready for the next night, carrying no memory of the weight it bore. There is something in this that the resting mind, hovering at the edge of sleep, might find not just comfortable, but consoling. To be held by something that accommodates completely, that asks nothing of you in return, that gives without condition and recovers without resentment. That is simply, completely, reliably there, night after night after night. The factories that made spring mattresses multiplied. The patents were filed, many of them, each one claiming some particular innovation, some specific arrangement of springs, or method of tempering steel, or system of tying individual coils together, so that the movement of one did not disturb its neighbor. The language of the patents is technical and dry, and not the least bit conducive to sleep. But what it describes is a generation of engineers and craftsmen genuinely excited about the problem of human rest, genuinely engaged in the project of making the sleeping surface better. And it did get better. Decade by decade through the latter half of the 19th century and into the 20th, the the spring mattress improved. The springs were refined. The padding above them grew more sophisticated. New materials arrived, cotton batting processed to a new consistency. Layers of natural fiber arranged with precision to provide the exact gradation from firm support at depth to soft accommodation at the surface that the body needed. The mattress became a thing that families passed down, not out of necessity, the way medieval families passed down feather beds because they were too valuable to discard, but out of affection, out of the particular attachment that develops between a body and a sleeping surface it knows well. The body that has slept for years on a particular mattress has learned its specific combination of give and support, its particular response to this body's specific weight and contour. The mattress has not, like the old flock mattress, deformed to fit. The springs prevent that. But there is still a familiarity, a recognition, the body returning to a known surface after days away and finding it exactly right. Finding rest arriving more quickly, more completely than it does anywhere else. Home, the mattress as home, the specific, irreplaceable home of sleep. Something else happened in the 19th century that is worth knowing, worth holding alongside the story of the spring mattress. Something that happened in the factories and the mills and the small, crowded houses of the industrial age, in the long, hard hours of labor and the short nights, in the bodies of people who were working harder and sleeping less than perhaps any generation before them. People began to talk about sleep differently, not as something that simply happened, not as the natural end of the day, the inevitable surrender of the body to darkness and rest, but as something that could be lost, something that could fail to come, something that the mind, newly complicated by the noise and speed and relentless stimulation of industrial life, could lie awake and reach for and not find. The word insomnia, which exists in Latin, which has always existed as a medical term, entered common usage in this period, not because sleeplessness was new. Human beings had always, in times of stress or illness or grief, lain awake through the dark hours. But because it was newly common, newly widespread, newly recognized as a condition of the age, a symptom of the particular kind of life the industrial world was producing, the mind that had all day been processing the volume and speed of modern information, the newspaper, the telegraph, the railway timetable, the factory floor's relentless rhythm, brought all of that stimulation to bed with it, lay down with it, could not simply set it aside the way the ancient sleeper had set aside the concerns of the day, which were real and serious, but which were also, once the sun went down, genuinely finished, done, waiting until morning without the ability to intrude. The industrial mind was not finished when the body lay down. It continued, turned things over, worried forward into tomorrow, reviewed the errors of today, ran through lists and plans, and the things that had not been done, and the things that needed to be done, and the things that might go wrong. And the spring mattress, the beautiful, responsive, yielding spring mattress, could do nothing about this, could only hold the body, could not reach up into the mind and still it, could not give the nervous system permission to release, could only offer its quiet accommodation and wait. This is a problem we still know. This is perhaps the most continuous thread in the entire history of sleep, not the surface on which we rest, which has improved so dramatically, but the mind above the surface, the mind that is always the last thing to let go, that holds on longest, turning and returning, reluctant to release the day's grip. The body is ready. The body has been ready for hours. It is only the mind that keeps the light on, keeps the engine running, keeps insisting that there is still something to attend to, something not yet resolved, something that cannot wait until morning. There is almost never anything that cannot wait until morning. The ancient sleeper knew this. The mind beneath the painted Egyptian stars knew this. The curtained medieval sleeper, sealed in their warm, dark enclosure, knew this. What they had, what we are still reaching for, is not a better mattress. It is permission. The deep, settled, completely felt permission to stop. Let the story give that permission now, because this is what bedtime stories are for in the end. Not information, not the history of mattresses, though the history of mattresses is genuinely interesting and has carried us a long and gentle way through the night. But permission, the soft, repeated, unhurried granting of permission that the mind needs before it will finally agree to let go. You may stop now. The springs beneath you are doing their work. Silently, without effort, without requiring anything from you. They are giving exactly where giving is needed and holding exactly where holding is needed. And they will continue to do both through every hour of the night, responding to every small shift and turn of your sleeping body without waking and without fatigue. The body is already there. The body made its decision some time ago. The muscles have released, or are releasing degree by degree, the long accumulation of the day's tension. The jaw, the shoulders, the hands, unclenching slowly, opening, going soft the way things go soft in warmth. The back, which carried everything all day, sinking now into the surface beneath it, feeling the springs give exactly enough, feeling the support arrive at exactly the right depth. The mind is the last thing. It is always the last thing. And it is tired too. The mind is tired, even if it does not always know it. Even if it keeps presenting things that seem urgent, things that seem to require attention, these are not urgent. They will wait. They have always waited. Everything that has ever seemed urgent in the hours before sleep has waited until morning. And in the morning, it was always more manageable than it seemed in the dark. Always smaller, always more solvable in the light. Let the thoughts move if they need to move. Do not fight them. Fighting thoughts in the dark is like fighting smoke. It disperses and returns and disperses again, and nothing is resolved. Let them move. Let them pass through without catching. Let them have their motion and their return, and let the attention, the tired, kind, patient attention, simply not follow them. Just watch them pass. The way the person on the train watches the landscape moving past the window without trying to hold any of it. Just moving, just passing. The springs are holding. The night is full and patient. The century outside, with its noise and speed and relentless forward motion, its factories and telegraphs and railways, and the 1,000 forms of stimulation it has invented, is outside, distant, held at the right distance by the walls of this room, this bed, this moment. Inside the moment, there is only this: the breath, the warmth, the springs, the slow and generous dark, the sleep that has been waiting, as it waited for the first person on the first pile of leaves, as it waited behind the closed curtains of the medieval bed, as it waited in the perfumed Egyptian night, still waiting. Patient as it has always been, knowing it will be arrived at, knowing it is already close. One breath, another, the springs settle, the night deepens, and the mind, the last to let go, the slowest to surrender, the most reluctant traveler, finally, gently, releases its grip on the day and falls softly into the dark, into the rest that has been waiting all this time, into sleep. Tonight, the bed you are in, there is a moment, and it comes every single night, without exception, without fail, in every time zone, and every season, and every corner of the world where human beings live, when the day ends, not when the clock says it ends, not when the schedule says it ends, not when the last item on the list has been attended to, or the last message has been read, or the last obligation of the evening has been discharged, but when the body says it ends, when something deep and unhurried and entirely beyond negotiation rises up from within the physical self and says, with the quiet authority of something that has been saying this for hundreds of thousands of years, enough. The day is done. It is time to go home. Home in this context does not mean a building. It does not mean an address or a postcode or any of the ways the modern world has of locating a person in space. It means something smaller and closer and more immediate than any of that. It means the bed, the specific, particular, irreplaceable bed that belongs to this body in this life. The sleeping place, the place the body knows the way it knows nothing else. Not with the mind's knowledge, not with memory or recognition, or any cognitive process, but with the knowledge that lives below all of that. In the muscles, in the bones, in the body's own long and faithful record of every night it is spent in rest. This is where we have arrived, at the end of this long and gentle story, not in ancient Egypt, not in a medieval castle, not in a Victorian mill town with its spring mattresses and its complicated industrial nights. Here, in this room, in this night, in this bed, in the bed you are actually in, right now, as these words move through you in whatever form they are moving, read or listened to, taken in through the eyes or the ears, received in the particular half-present way that the mind in its late hours receives things, with the volume turned down and the edges softened, and the whole apparatus of critical engagement quietly, gracefully standing down. You are here. The story has been leading here all along. Let us look at what surrounds you, not examine it, not analyze it. Just look, gently, the way one looks at familiar and beloved things at the end of a long day, with a kind of soft and grateful recognition that requires no particular effort. The ceiling is above you. It may be plaster or paint, or the flat white expanse of a modern surface that holds no particular beauty and makes no particular claim. It may have a crack in one corner that you have looked at so many times it has become a familiar presence, a thing you know the way you know a face. It may be high or low, smooth or textured, lit dimly by whatever light remains in the room or entirely dark. Whatever it is your ceiling, the specific ceiling of your specific sleeping place, the one that has been there above you. On every night you have slept in this bed, there is something about a familiar ceiling in the dark that is one of the most quietly reassuring things in the world. It does not ask anything of you. It simply is. It has been there when you were happy, and when you were worried, and when you were exhausted, and when you were restless, and when you were simply tired in the ordinary good way of a day well lived. It holds no judgment. It offers no advice. It is simply above you, patient and permanent, and entirely indifferent in the most comforting possible way. The walls are around you, and the floor is below, beneath the mattress, beneath the bed frame, beneath everything. The floor is there, and below the floor the building, and below the building the earth, and below the earth something so deep and old and patient that it has no name in any language that does not sound either too scientific or too mystical. The ground, the original ground, the same ground on which the first human being lay down to sleep under a sky full of stars in a world that was young and quiet and enormous. Everything that has happened in the story of beds, every leaf gathered, every wooden frame carved, every curtain hung, every spring coiled and tempered and fitted into its place, happened between that original ground and this moment. Between between that first tired person lying down on the bare earth and you lying here now in this bed at the end of this particular day in this particular life. All of it was in the service of this. All of it was building toward this. This specific arrangement of support and softness and warmth and enclosure that holds you right now, tonight, in the particular way that only your bed holds you. Think for a moment, just a gentle moment, without urgency, about the mattress beneath you. You may not think about your mattress very often. Most people do not. It is one of the great background facts of life. The mattress, present every night, doing its work without acknowledgement, holding the body through all its sleeping hours, without ever asking to be noticed or appreciated or considered. It simply does what it does, night after night, with the same quiet reliability that the springs at its center were designed to provide. But it has a history. Your mattress, this specific one, the one whose particular combination of firmness and give your body knows so well, has a history that runs all the way back through everything this story has traveled. The principle of the spring, refined over more than a century and a half of continuous improvement, is in there. The understanding of human body mechanics, accumulated through generations of people paying attention to how bodies rest and what they need, that is in there too. The knowledge of materials and temperature, and the precise relationship between support and softness that makes the difference between sleep and real sleep. All of it is in there, worked into the construction of this object that you lie on every night without thinking about. It is not a simple thing. It only seems simple because it works. The things that work best always seem simple. The effort is invisible in the result. The mattress beneath you right now is the answer to a question that human beings have been asking since the first person lay down on the bare ground and felt the hardness of it and thought, this could be better. Every iteration of that question, every attempt at an answer, every pile of leaves and wooden frame and feather bed and coiled spring and layer of padding, all of it was moving with the slow and patient determination of human ingenuity across the centuries toward the answer you are resting on tonight. It has arrived. It is here. It is beneath you. Let it hold you. And the pillow. Let us give the pillow its moment, because the pillow is, in many ways, the most intimate object in a sleeping life, more intimate than the mattress, which is large and impersonal and shared. The pillow belongs to the head specifically, to this particular head, and over time it becomes shaped by it, not dramatically, not in the way that old mattresses were shaped by bodies before springs, but subtly. The filling shifting and settling in response to the specific weight and warmth and position of this head. On these nights, in this sleep, the pillow holds the face at night. This is worth considering, even briefly. The face, the most expressive part of the body, the part that is presented to the world all day, that performs and communicates and receives and responds without pause, lies against the pillow at night and simply rests. Nothing is required of it. The eyes are closed. The jaw, which has been held in more or less constant readiness all day, unclenches. The small muscles around the eyes and mouth, which have been working continuously in the service of expression and communication, let go. The face becomes, in sleep, simply a face, not a presentation, not a performance, just the physical reality of it, at rest against the softness of the pillow. There is something very tender about this, something worth acknowledging, even if only to oneself, in the privacy of the dark. The face at rest, the body at rest, the whole performing, presenting, effortful machinery of a person at rest. The pillow receives all of this without comment. It simply holds, soft and warm and familiar, and entirely, completely on your side. Now let the blanket be felt. Whatever covers you, duvet, or blanket, or sheet alone in the warm months, feel the weight of it. Not the specific weight in grams or ounces or any measurable quantity. The felt weight, the way it distributes itself across the body, draping over the contours, settling into the spaces between, resting along the length of you with the particular quality of something that is exactly heavy enough. The weight of bedding is one of the most ancient and most reliable sleep inducers the human body knows. It is not accidental. It is the same instinct that made the medieval sleeper pull the feather bed up over themselves, that made the first person wrap animal skins around themselves against the cold, that makes every person, regardless of the ambient temperature, feel more comfortable with some weight of covering than without. The weight says, you are enclosed, you are contained. The world ends here, at the edge of this covering, and everything outside it is at a comfortable and manageable distance. The nervous system receives this message with the same relief it receives every other signal of genuine safety. The muscles, which maintain a certain baseline of readiness even in rest, a readiness to respond, to react, to move if movement is required, allow that readiness to diminish, degree by degree, breath by breath. The covering is there. The enclosure is established. The body can truly, fully release. Feel the covering release you now. Or rather, feel yourself release into it. The distinction matters. It is not the covering that acts. It is you choosing, in the quiet and private way that only the body can choose, to let go. The temperature of the room. This too is part of the sleep that is coming. The particular temperature of this room, this night, slightly cooler than the temperature beneath the covers, which creates the perfect physiological condition for sleep. The body's core temperature drops in the hours before and during sleep, and a cool room assists this natural process, allows it to happen more completely, more quickly. The coolness of the air against the face, the only part of the body exposed to the room, is a sensation that is deeply, anciently associated with sleep. With the cool night air of every sleeping place in human history. The open plain, the cave entrance, the castle chamber, the Victorian bedroom. All of them were cooler at night than during the day. And the sleeping body learned, over a very long time, to take that coolness as a signal, as permission. The cool air moves very gently in the room. It crosses the face with something that is barely a touch, barely enough to register. And the body registers it nonetheless, files it under night, under rest, under the world is as it should be, and the temperature is right, and the covering is warm, and the surface is holding, and there is nothing to do now but sleep. Let us speak about the sounds of tonight, because every night has its sounds, and every sleeping place has its own acoustic character, and the sounds of the sleeping place are part of what the body learns when it learns to sleep there. Part of what it means to be in a familiar bed is to be held within familiar sounds. Sounds that the sleeping mind knows. Sounds that have accompanied hundreds of nights of rest and have been absorbed over time into the background texture of sleep itself. Whatever sounds are present in your room tonight, the particular quality of the silence, which is never truly silent, but always has its own low level of sound, its own texture of ambient noise. These sounds are yours. They belong to this sleeping place. The refrigerator in another room, cycling on and off with its small mechanical routine. The particular creak of the building, which settles at night the way all buildings settle, releasing the tension of the day in small structural adjustments. The sound of weather outside, if there is weather, rain, which is perhaps the oldest and most reliable sleep sound in the world. The sound of water on a surface, the white noise of it blurring the hard edges of every other sound into something soft and continuous and without end, or the wind moving past the window with the particular tone of this night's wind, this season's wind, the wind in this specific place with its specific landscape and its specific quality of darkness, or simply quiet. The deep and layered quiet of late night in a place where most people are sleeping, which has its own particular richness. The quiet of a world that has, for a few hours, decided to rest, to stop producing, to simply be in the dark, without demand or output or motion. All of it is the sound of your sleep, the sound of the place where you rest, the sound that the body has learned to associate with release, with the approach of sleep, with the beginning of the night's long and necessary journey inward. Listen to it now, without intention, without analyzing it. Just let it be there. Just let the ears receive it passively, the way the sleeping mind receives everything without grasping, without holding, without requiring it to mean anything beyond what it simply is. Sound, night sound, the sound of rest. The long story of beds has come, at last, all the way home. It has traveled an almost incomprehensible distance to arrive here. From the open plain, where the first human being lay down beneath a sky full of stars and felt the ground receive them. Through the gathering of leaves and grasses, the first deliberate act of making a sleeping place better. Through the carved ebony beds of Egypt, raised on lion's legs, covered in linen white as the desert moon, the alabaster headdress holding the dreaming head with the wings of gods spread protectively above. Through the great curtained beds of medieval Europe, their heavy wool keeping the cold at bay, the feather mattress yielding to the weight of tired bodies, the candle burning low, and the stone walls humming in the wind. Through the spring mattress of the industrial age, its coiled steel holding the body's contours without memory, without fatigue, giving and recovering, and giving again through all the nights of all the years. All of that, all of those thousands of years of human ingenuity and human need, and the simple, persistent, completely universal wish for a sleeping place that is as good as it can possibly be. All of it has arrived at this room, this bed, this moment. You are the inheritor of the entire history of human sleep. Every person who ever lay down and felt the ground was too hard and reached for something softer. Every craftsman who carved a bed frame and polished the wood until it caught the light. Every weaver who made linen fine enough to serve as the covering of a pharaoh's rest. Every engineer who filed a patent for a spring arrangement and believed, genuinely believed, that improving the quality of human sleep was a worthy and serious pursuit. Every parent who smoothed a child's bedding and tucked the edges in and stood for a moment in the doorway looking at the sleeping face and felt, without words, the full weight of their wish for this person to rest well, to sleep deeply, to wake restored. All of them were working toward this, toward you, toward this specific night, this specific bed, this specific body lying down at the end of a specific day that no one else will ever have lived, in a specific life that belongs entirely and only to you. This is not a small thing. It deserves to be felt, even briefly, even in the half-present way that the mind at the edge of sleep feels things, softly, without analysis, just as a warmth, a rightness, a sense of being held by something larger than the immediate moment. You are held by the entire history of human rest. And now, right now, in this moment, as the story approaches its end, what is happening in the body? Perhaps the eyes are already closed. Perhaps they have been closed for some time. The words arriving through the ears or through the eyelids that move just slightly with the effort of reading, the body already ahead of the mind, already arrived at the place the story has been walking toward. Perhaps the breath has slowed. This happens so gradually that it is impossible to identify the moment when it changed, when the breath of a waking person became the breath of someone approaching sleep. There is no clear line. There is only a continuum of slowing, of deepening, of the breath becoming less effortful and more automatic, less consciously drawn and more simply happening. The body doing what bodies do when they are finally, truly allowed to rest. Perhaps the thoughts have thinned. The particular quality of late-night thoughts, that mixture of the day's residue and tomorrow's anticipation, and the mind's own restless self-examination, has perhaps become less dense, less populated. The thoughts that were circling a little while ago with some urgency have perhaps slowed their circling, have perhaps drifted apart, are perhaps now moving at a sufficient distance from the center of attention that they no longer feel pressing, no longer feel like things that need to be addressed, resolved, held onto. They can go. They can drift wherever thoughts drift when the mind releases them. Out into the dark, into whatever space receives the thoughts of people falling asleep, into the vast and patient reservoir of every thought that has ever been thought in the dark hours, and then released, and then forgotten by morning, having served their purpose, having kept the mind company for a little while in the space between waking and sleep. They can go. You do not need them tonight. The first human being lay down on the ground, and the sky above them was full of stars. That is where the story began. And now, at the end of the story, in this room, in this bed, in this night that is yours, the sky is still there. Beyond the ceiling, beyond the roof, beyond whatever thickness of cloud or city light stands between this room and the open dark, the sky is there. The stars are there. The same stars, or rather the same lights from the same celestial objects, traveling the same distances to arrive at this particular corner of a particular small planet where human beings have always slept. They are not watching over you. They are not conscious of you. They do not know that you exist, or that you are lying here at the end of a long day, approaching sleep, held by the warmth of your bed and the weight of your covering, and the accumulated ingenuity of your entire species applied over many thousands of years to the problem of how to rest. But they are there, and knowing they are there, knowing the sky exists above this ceiling, that the same sky that arched over every sleeping place in this entire long story arches over this one, is, in its own quiet way, a kind of comfort. You are part of something very old, something that goes all the way down to the beginning of what it means to be human. Something that connects you without sentimentality, but with genuine fact, to every person who has ever lain down in the dark and and felt the day release them, and the night receive them. Every one of them came to this moment, the moment just before sleep, the moment where the body is ready and the thoughts are finally quiet enough, and the dark is deep enough, and the warmth is sufficient, and the mind at last lets go. They all came here, and they all went through, and so will you. There is nothing left to do. The day is finished. Whatever it held, whatever it required of you, whatever it took, whatever it gave, whatever remains undone and will wait until tomorrow, whatever was hard and whatever was good, and whatever simply was, it is finished. It is behind you now, at the distance that sleep puts between a person and their day. A good distance, a necessary distance, the distance that makes tomorrow possible. Tomorrow is not here yet. Tomorrow is its own country, with its own weather, its own requirements, its own particular shape that cannot be known or planned for or worried about from here. From here, tonight, lying in this bed, tomorrow is simply not present. It does not exist yet. It is waiting somewhere beyond the hours of sleep, patient and unhurried, requiring nothing from you until it arrives. There is only now this breath, this warmth, this weight of covering, this familiar ceiling, or this familiar darkness where the ceiling is, this particular silence, or this particular sound of your particular night, this bed, this specific, beloved, entirely ordinary, and entirely irreplaceable bed, this body which has been working since it woke this morning, which has been carrying you through the day with a faithfulness that deserves, at the end of it, more gratitude than it usually receives. This body that breathes without being asked and keeps the heart beating without supervision, and has been asking quietly for the last hour or more to be allowed to rest. Allow it now, not as an instruction, not as another item on the list of things to do, not as something to achieve or accomplish or get right. Just allow it. Step back, if the mind can step back, from the forward-leaning, task-managing, problem-solving posture it has held all day. Just allow the body to do what it already knows how to do, what it has been doing for every night of this life, what every body in every sleeping place in the entire long history of human rest has done when it was finally, truly, completely allowed. It will sleep. You will sleep. The breath will slow. The thoughts will thin to nothing. The body will sink, just slightly, just perceptibly, the final degree of release into the mattress beneath it. And the night will do what the night has always done. It will hold you gently, completely, without condition, without requirement, without asking anything in return, the way the ground held the first sleeper, the way the gathered leaves held the next, the way the carved Egyptian bed held its dreamer beneath the painted stars, the way the closed curtains hands held the medieval night in warmth, the way the springs hold every body that lies down on them in trust, the way this bed, your bed, holds you right now, tonight, in the dark, in the warmth, in the quiet, in the deep and patient and ancient and entirely sufficient night. Sleep now. The story is finished. The long, slow history of every bed that was ever made, every leaf that was ever gathered, every wooden frame that was ever carved, every spring that was ever coiled, it ends here. In this room, in this moment, in this breath. Let the breath go. Let the next one come on its own, without assistance, the way it always does. Let the one after that be slower. Let the one after that be slower still. Let the mind release its last held thought, whatever it is, however important it seems, into the dark, where it will wait without harm until morning, when everything is easier and the light is back, and the world makes the kind of sense it never quite makes in the dark hours. Let the body go all the way down, into the springs, into the warmth, into the night that has been waiting for you since before you woke this morning, into sleep, real sleep, deep sleep, the sleep that restores, the sleep that has been waiting at the end of every human day since the very first day, the sleep you have earned, the sleep you deserve, the sleep that is already, even now, coming to meet you. Here, now, softly, all the way. Good night, the story is done. The bed holds you. The night holds the bed. And all the way down beneath everything, the patient earth holds the night. You are held. You are safe. You are home. Sleep well.